Good morning, councillors, and good morning to anyone tuning in on the live feed. And welcome to the Personnel Committee of Derby City Council. To introduce myself, I'm Councillor Paul Hazelgrave, Labour and Cooperative Councillor for Abbey Ward. And I'll just ask councillors to introduce themselves, please. Balbia?
I'm the Councillor Balbia Sandhu for Normanton Ward.
Alison?
Councillor Alison Holmes from Mickleover Ward.
Ross?
Councillor Ross McChrystal, Chellaston Ward.
And Paul?
Councillor Paul Pegg from Mackworth Ward.
And we're also being serviced by a number of officers in the background who will also no doubt speak at some point if they're asked to. Right, so just to fill in for anybody who is tuning in, this item about redundancy payments, etc., I think the title is Redundancy Payments Response to the Motion Approved at Council on the 25th of November 2020. And on that day, full Council asked the Personnel Committee to review redundancy payments. As it happens, I'm the new chair this year for this committee, and it did occur to me during all this upheaval economically, both through COVID and possibly Brexit, that we may need to look at this again. So it has come through the route of the full council, but I did support that at the time for the reasons I've outlined. Just now then to go through the formal issues, have we any apologies?
No apologies, thank you, Chair.
Right, it's declarations of interest next, I think. Yeah. Have we any declarations of interest? Thank you. Clearly, if anything comes up in the course of the meeting and you feel that it would affect you in terms of that, please speak up at that time. And I think it's now the minutes of the last meeting. Could we share those, please?
Yep. Can everyone see that?
Not yet. Yes.
Yep.
It could be done with being made a little bit bigger if you can, Dom.
Oops. Is that okay?
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So running through 1220 we'll look at. I mean, Mike and I looked at this at the time of the pre-meeting. We were happy with them at that time, but councillors, I'm sure you've looked as well. If we just run through that item. Yeah. So that, and we'll just look at the resolutions. So that item was covered very comprehensively by the minutes, and I'm sure I would hope that we're all happy with those as a true record, but we'll deal with them in the round at the end. Are we happy that those recommendations, as stated there, capture the will of the committee at that time? Yes?
All right.
Happy with that?
Yep, good. Right, 1320 then. Attendance management and well-being. We had a good discussion on that as well. And then just looking at the resolutions. And I think that captures it quite well. Are we all agreed with the that last minute's end?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Okay, so can we agree that they're a true record of proceedings?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, and
Yes,
now
Chair.
we'll come on to I think the substantive item of the committee, which is item 5, redundancy payments. At pre-meet, Mike and I went through this fairly thoroughly, and we both agreed that it would be inappropriate for us to make any recommendation which was in breach of the Equality Act. And therefore we felt that options for this committee would be limited, but I don't think non-existent. I think some of the discussion centred on, and the reason probably for full council referring this, was that clearly people's livelihoods in all sectors of the workforce up and down the country are more precarious than they normally would be, and I think that's, you know, it varies in precarity, but that's the general picture. And I think there was a concern as well that the younger members of the workforce, if they were to be made redundant, it would hit them hard, and it might be difficult for them to find work quickly. In the present climate, I think unemployment's gone up to 5%. It was reported earlier this week, 5.something, 5.4, 5.5, and that there was a preponderance of younger people affected by that. Of course, in that time, there would, in a period of higher unemployment, there would also be a difficulty in older members of the workforce finding new employment if they were to be made redundant. So with that in mind, and that full council does wish us to look at this, I would like to make a proposal which actually is covered by 4.2 in the paper. If we could look at that, please. In item 5. So if we could share that.
Just sharing that now, Chair.
So this section of the report sets out a case which we accepted about staying within the bounds of the Equality Act, for the reasons that we wouldn't want the council to go into lots of disputes on that and tie up legal teams, and also there could be a reputational risk. But in the 4th paragraph, if we look at that, the lowest one on the screen, it says, to maintain the council's ability to rely on this exemption, any changes to enhance the redundancy scheme must use the same age bands as the statutory scheme and mirror the associated weekly multiplier. So for an example, an increase to 1 week per year of completed service for under 22s result in an increase to 1.5 weeks for age 22 to 40 and 2 weeks for 41 and over. Equalising without mirroring would remove the ability to rely on the exemption and leave the council vulnerable to risk of a discrimination claim. So we could, and I think we ought to seriously look at, is there an appetite from the committee to actually do that? We'd stay within the Equality Act, but we would enhance the amount of money, effectively, that people made redundant either voluntarily or compulsorily would receive. Have we any views on that?
Chair, if I could just say, it might be worth letting the officers go through the report,
Yeah,
and then perhaps
sorry, I was just about to say that. Yeah.
perhaps
Yeah,
return
by
to
all
this
means.
at the end, if
Yeah.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think we'd just like a bit better understanding and some more detail, particularly around obviously the big part of this, which is potential cost.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll stop sharing now, and then I'll pass over to the officers to go through the report then, if that's okay. Thanks.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. It's Liz Moore, Head of HR, and I'll be presenting this report to the committee today. So thank you for Thank you. Thank you for your introductory comments, Chair. And just to reconfirm for committee members, as you say, this report has arisen from a motion that was taken to full council on the 25th of November last year to consider equalising across the age band the number of weeks service used in our redundancy payments calculation. So the report does set out that our current policy for redundancy payments is based on the statutory calculation for redundancy pay, and I'd like to take you through our recommendation and the reasons behind that, and then I appreciate, Chair, there might be questions and further discussion to follow. So our recommendation, which the committee members will have seen, is to continue to use the statutory redundancy calculation age bands and weeks per year multiplier when calculating an individual's redundancy pay, and I'll talk through that in a little more detail in a moment, Chair, and retain the enhancement that the Council already applies when using actual weeks pay, which is uncapped when calculating a colleague's redundancy pay if they leave the Council by reason of redundancy. So just to talk through the reasons around the recommendation, which I know you'll have read, Chair, and other committee members, but also around some of the supporting information. You'll have seen that we do use a lawful statutory redundancy scheme in order to calculate the basis of our redundancy pay. And as I mentioned earlier, this is enhanced within the Council by using a colleague's actual weekly pay rather than the statutory week's pay, which is capped in the statute at £538. So that means that the Council might pay more than £538 per week for somebody's redundancy payment, depending on their salary. And if I can draw the committee's attention to section 4.1, we've set out here what the statutory calculation basis is, which is using 3 age bands determined in law to determine how many weeks pay an individual will receive for each completed year of service. And if I can draw your attention as well to a point that you've referred to, Chair, in terms of the Equality Act. As I say, these bands are set out in statute, and there is an exemption, a lawful exemption in the Equality Act for us to pay based on age basis in terms of redundancy calculation. So the Act contains an exemption from age discrimination rules for both the statutory redundancy pay scheme and any enhanced scheme that we might include. And the enhanced scheme, as I say, Chair, is we don't cap the statutory weekly pay. We'll pay based on an individual's actual salary. And this is based on this exemption in the Equality Act, comments that you made earlier, Chair. It's a public policy decision being based on, it's accepted that older individuals often face more of a challenge in gaining employment, particularly after they've been made redundant, and therefore there is a need potentially for their redundancy pay to sustain them for longer than a younger individual who is more likely to obtain work sooner. Now, of course, it's true that younger individuals could also claim discrimination in that they aren't able to accrue the length of service that older individuals may have. But again, this public policy aspect is also covered by the same exemption in the Equality Act. So it's very clear from a statutory point of view that the provisions that we currently apply, which are based in law, are appropriate and are allowed under the law, this distinction on age grounds. If we equalise the number of weeks' pay, that would remove the lawful exemption that's within the Act, and it could leave the Council vulnerable to discrimination claims from older employees that we might struggle to objectively justify. And again, I'd refer you to paragraph 4.3, section 4.3 in the report. Based on our current scheme, which is based on the law, we've never been challenged on our lawful redundancy payment criteria because we're using the exemption that the Equality Act allows us to do. If we were to move away from that statutory scheme, we wouldn't be able to rely on that lawful exemption in future, and we could be open to age discrimination challenges. And we'd struggle, I think, Chair, to objectively justify any potential discrimination. We could and would also incur additional costs, as we've referred to in paragraph 3.4, by equalising the number of weeks of service for redundancy pay at a time of significant challenge due to the COVID pandemic. And I'd just like to note, Chair, if I may, in 3.4 of the report and 4.4, just a point of clarification, we've referred to a change in employment legislation, the restriction of public sector exit pay Regulations 2020, those have just very recently been revoked by the government earlier this week. So that reference is no longer valid, but unfortunately the timing of that being revoked and that revocation being announced and the publication of the report, we just weren't able to change the report in time. So apologies, Chair, but that has been changed by the government since. So touching on this point of increased costs, as I just mentioned, additional costs would be incurred if we equalise the number of weeks service for redundancy pay at a time of significant challenge, both in the COVID pandemic and in the general budget position, obviously, for the Council. And obviously the budget was discussed at full Council last night. We do need to consider the increased costs that such a proposal to equalise the age bands might mean. We can't always guarantee or specify with any great certainty how many redundancies the Council might consider in any one year, because obviously the factors vary significantly from year to year. It might depend on what's in our medium-term financial plan, which the Council sets, or any proposed service reconfigurations. So it makes it very difficult, Chair, for us to predict what additional costs would be encountered if we equalise the pay. However, if we were to look at the last few financial years, the last 3 financial years, and equalise the pay to pay 1.5 weeks for everyone, again, and losing that legal exemption, we've calculated that based on a mean average, the total redundancy payments would represent an additional cost of just over £200,000. Also, moving away from having the distinction in law that we're allowed, the legal exemption, would put us as an outlier to many other councils. To move away from the statutory scheme and not apply the age banding would put us as an outlier. As I mentioned earlier, applying the statutory policy that is legally compliant and free from risk due to the exemption set out in the Equality Act affords the Council a degree of protection. So those are the points that we've made in the report, Chair, in terms of our recommendation is to continue to use the statutory redundancy calculation age bands and weeks as a multiplier, as allowed in law, both for the reasons of affording us still a risk-free scheme due to the legal exemption in the Equality Act, and also maintaining costs at a reasonable level within a challenging budget situation or financial situation, COVID situation. So the recommendation, Chair, still is at 2.1 to continue to use the statutory redundancy calculation age bands and weeks when calculating an individual's redundancy pay, but also to retain the enhancement that we already provide, which is that we pay redundancy pay based on actual salary and we don't cap it at the statutory level. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you for a very comprehensive report that covers all the angles, I think, and thank you to the people behind the scenes, Charlotte Hutton and Tony Nash, and Simon Riley for sponsoring this, so that we have a really good, clear picture of the situation. You did mention that the situation has changed slightly, and it's obviously going to be a moving picture all the time, and I'd just like you to flesh out how that difference of withdrawal by the government of the what was it called, the restriction of public sector exit payment regulations, what effect that has in terms of our discussion today.
Okay, thanks, Chair. So the regulations that were referred to, as I say, in paragraph 3.4, the restriction of public sector exit payment regulations, would have put, in broad terms, would have put a cap on redundancy payments and including redundancy payments, I should say, Chair, exit payments in the public sector, not only local authorities, but the broader public sector, of £95,000. So that if somebody's exit costs from a local government organisation or another public sector body would have exceeded £95,000, and that could be elements of pension or redundancy payment and pension contributions and pension benefits, Chair, that would have been capped under the regulations at £95,000. The government has withdrawn those regulations just earlier this month, announced that, so that cap is no longer in place within the public sector.
Thank you, Liz.
Thanks.
Right, so would anyone like to open up with any points they'd like to make at this point? I've done a lot of talking at the moment, and I know Ross has come in with some a comment earlier. Would anyone else like to come in? You could use the chat thing, and I I can keep
Yes,
an eye
please,
on that.
please, Chair. It's Councillor Ross McCris again. Sorry, I haven't got access to the
Ross.
chat. My internet's
All
really
right. Okay, Ross.
dodgy here.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, thanks for the report. I mean, it's a really interesting read. I work in recruitment, so I do have a bit of exposure and a bit of understanding about this. And my sense and what I feel at the moment is that the package that the council put in terms of enhanced package is good. And certainly when you look at the private sector, it goes above and beyond in many cases. So it is a good package that that we currently offer. I do get the argument regarding quality, but I think that needs to be addressed by Westminster in my view. And I think in the current situation, I'd struggle to be in favour of anything that is going to add additional cost to the authority and ultimately to the taxpayer. So I'd be very much in favour of supporting the officer's recommendation in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. Any other views? Well, just as a matter of interest to the committee, we did discuss the extent to which any change might be applied, or if the existing policy was just reconfirmed, how it might be applied. And I don't know if the situation's changed, Liz, but now that the MTFP's been ratified last night, I think the figure's something like, the figure on the paper is something like 40-ish redundancies, 39 point odd FTE equivalents, yeah? But you did say at the meeting that many of those would actually be covered by not replacing staff, in other words, not filling vacancies. So the number of actual redundancies is hopefully, and the council is trying to keep the actual number of redundancies in this financial year as low as possible.
That's right, Chair. So there were a number of the proposals in the report that would, subject to the council's approval last night, would be met by vacancies, as you say, not being filled. So there are potentially some redundancies this year, which we've been consulting on, but the number that you've quoted there, as you say, Chair, also includes a number of vacancies as well. That's right.
Right. Yeah. Thanks, Liz. So with that in mind, I'd like to return to where I jumped the gun earlier. I think we do need to give some consideration to whether we ought to vary the conditions, but that those varied conditions should be within the bounds of the Equality Act and therefore given the protection that gives us in terms of reputational damage or challenge. So I will return to, I'm just going to put this forward and we'll either accept it or we won't, and then we'll move the discussion on. Would we be happy to look, would anyone be in favour of moving to the way it would work out if we did paragraph 4 of 4.2, where we actually went for 1 week per year of completed service for under 22, so it goes up by 50%, 6 months. 1.5 weeks for age 22 to 40, so I think that goes up by 50%, and 2 weeks for 41 and over, which would actually go up by 33%. But although the percentages, obviously the higher you go, the percentages are stronger, right? So a lower percentage does actually increase the amount of money you get all the same. Would anybody have an appetite for going along those lines?
Chair, could I, it's Paul McMahon, your legal advisor and also an employment lawyer, could I just offer a view and perhaps a bit of advice on this question? Because
by all means, Paul, that's why you're here. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I've been feverishly trawling through the Equality Act while the discussion's been going on to try to ascertain what we can do and stay within the protection offered by the exception. And I have to say I'm not entirely sure that the proposal at 4.2 reflects the exception within the Equality Act. And if I can explain it like this, at the moment, if we look at 4.1, you can see that somebody under 22 would get a half a week's pay per completed year of service.
Yeah.
And then the next bracket between 22 and 41 weeks pay, and then over 41, 1.5 weeks pay. Now the proposal, or the I don't know if it's a proposal, but it's an example being set out at the fourth paragraph of 4.2. So it talks about increasing to 1 week per year of completed service for under 22s, and then an increase to 1.5 weeks for those aged 22 to 40. I'm not sure that that's entirely mirroring the calculation of statutory redundancy pay, because if you go back up to the previous paragraph, the difference between those aged under 22 and those aged over 22 is twice as much.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that if you increase the payments for those aged under 22 to a week's pay, I'm not sure that you wouldn't have to increase the payments for those aged 22 to 40 to 2 weeks pay.
Right. I see. Right.
And then do the same again for those aged over 41 and effectively give them 4 weeks pay. Now,
right. Yeah. That's a different ball game, Paul.
It seems that's right. And I think we might be asking a different question here now. And I think that I know it's going to put it back a little bit, but I think the wise thing might be to take that back and have another look at that and then bring it back to the committee, if that's the proposal being put forward.
Well, let's see if it's got legs anyway. Would anyone, let's have views from fellow councillors now who would like further information and clarifications, because I think we owe it to full council to make sure we do explore all the angles and we have really good advice which we can follow.
Chair, could I just speak?
Of course you can. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Alison. Yeah, please.
I think, as has been said, I don't think I've ever seen such a comprehensive and well-explained report as in front of us. Fabulous job by the officers.
Mm-hmm.
And my opinion would be very difficult to change anything as is. To be perfectly honest, it's working, it's within the law, it's the norm, and currently, is it the right time to be putting more burden onto the council financially at this current time? I just feel like the status quo should be maintained in this case, and I can see what you're trying to explore, but as just been explained again, could open up a further can of worms and further expense for the council. My opinion is we should just leave it and accept the recommendation 2.1. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Paul Pegg, have you a view on this? Paul?
Sorry, Chair. I keep coming in and out of it. I'm having some problems around here. City Fibre are at it, and I'm not sure what they're doing. So anyway, I specifically, providing we are within the law and we're not doing anything wrong in that respect, and the fact that it's difficult because on one side you want to increase things, and then on the other side we've got a situation where we're working within the law and everything else, and I'm happy to just go along with the paper as it is at this point in time, Chair.
Right, yeah, that's really helpful. Ross, can you come in again? You might want to add to what you've said before.
Yeah, I mean, my view remains the same. I'll be loath to increase potential cost to the taxpayer. The irony could be, by actually increasing cost to the taxpayer, we could actually be making more people redundant as a consequence. You never know. So I think I like what you want to do, Paul, and I do honestly. But at this point, I just think it's the wrong time for local authority to be increasing its costs and going above and beyond what is statutory, and in fact an enhanced statutory payment for redundancies. And I'm more about wanting to do everything we can to protect local government employees, retain our expertise, rather than increase cost on the potential cost on local authority, which in turn might generate the need for more right sizing within Derby City Council. I think that's my view, Paul.
Thanks very much, Ross. I think I've got the job here of not just being the chair of the committee, but trying to make sure that we have full cognizance of the fact that it was referred by full council. So that's why I'm being really cautious about exploring all sorts of things. But I'm clearly leaving it open to the committee, and I'm really keen to get to know their views on it. Balby, have you any views on this?
Yes, Chair. Listening to officers and going through the papers, I think we should stick to a recommendation.
Yep.
That's what my view is.
Yep.
But we don't want to put a more burden on our council.
No.
So for the time being, we should stick with the recommendation.
Right. Okay. So I think there is a consensus then now that we actually just go straight to accepting the recommendation without further delving into possibilities of enhancing anything as outlined in the fourth paragraph of 4.2. But by doing that and going through a rather circuitous route to get there, at least full council, if I were to look at the minutes, I hope, when we get them from this meeting, they'll see that we have explored any possibility that we had while keeping to what we agreed, Mike and I know he's not here, but we agreed very firmly that we can't really stray beyond the bounds of the Equality Act. And Paul McMahon's very helpful interjection tells us that what we have there and what I put forward may well be an example that doesn't fulfil the criteria, which would give us a lawful exemption. So with that, I'm going to now recommend or ask us, are we happy to accept the recommendation at 2.1?
Yes, Chair.
Yes. Yes, Chair.
Yeah. So we're unanimous on that?
Yeah, I'm more than happy with that.
Yeah, good. Thanks very much. We've not done bad for time, but I think we've given it a good stab at being fair and open and seeing what committee wanted to do. We've had really good support from officers. Thanks very much, Paul, for coming in. That really could have saved us from a tricky situation where there was all sorts of chaos in the background and we had to resolve it by re-meeting and rescinding what we'd come up with. So thanks very much to everyone and also all those behind the scenes. And I think that's the end of this session. Goodbye to anyone who is on the live link. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
folks.
Chair.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, cheerio.
Sure.